I moved to northern Montana because I wanted silence. Not the peaceful kind you hear in meditation apps, but the real silence. The kind that presses against your ears so hard you start noticing your own breathing. After years of city noise, crowded apartments, and neighbors who felt entitled to every inch of shared space, isolation sounded like freedom. Winter was the price you paid for that freedom. I bought a small, single-story house just outside a dying town. The real estate agent warned me about the storms, said winters out there weren't forgiving. I smiled and told her I worked remotely and liked being alone. She gave me a look I didn't understand at the time. The first winter was manageable, long, cold, lonely, but predictable. The second winter was worse. Heavier snow, stronger winds. By the third, the locals were calling it the kind of winter that reminds you who's in charge. The blizzard that changed everything came in early February. It wasn't supposed to be historic. Just another snowstorm layered on top of a season already heavy with them. I worked late that day, staring at my laptop while the sky outside slowly turned white. By the time I logged off, the world beyond my windows looked erased. Snow fell sideways. The wind screamed like it was angry about something. I cooked dinner, half listening to the weather radio warning people to stay indoors. Around 8 p.m., the power flickered twice, then died completely. I wasn't surprised. Out here, power outages were just part of winter. I lit a few candles, wrapped myself in a blanket, and settled on the couch. The house groaned and shifted as the wind battered it, each gust rattling the windows like fists. That's when I heard the knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. I didn't move. No one should have been outside. The road leading to my house hadn't been plowed in days, and visibility was near zero. Even if someone wanted to walk up my driveway, they'd be fighting knee-deep snow and winds strong enough to knock you off your feet. The knocking came again. Same rhythm. Same force. My first thought was that the wind was playing tricks on me, that maybe a loose branch had hit the door just right. But something about the timing felt deliberate. Like whoever or whatever was out there knew they had my attention. I stood up slowly and moved closer to the door, staying quiet. I didn't turn on the porch light. I didn't ask who it was. Through the thick wood, I heard breathing, shallow, uneven. A voice followed, muffled but clear enough to understand. "Please, I need help." My stomach tightened. I asked who it was. There was a pause long enough that I wondered if they'd left. Then the voice answered, quieter now. "You know me." That made my skin prickle. I told myself it was just my nerves, that fear had a way of filling in gaps with worst-case scenarios. Still, I didn't open the door. I told the person I was calling for help and that they should wait. Another pause. Then, the voice said my name. Not shouted, not guessed. Said softly, like it had been practiced. I stepped back from the door. I hadn't introduced myself to anyone since moving there. I ordered groceries online, worked from home, and avoided town whenever possible. No one should have known my name. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher sounded tired, overwhelmed. When I explained what was happening, she told me units were already stretched thin, and response time could be hours. "Do not open the door," she said firmly. I promised I wouldn't. While I was still on the call, the knocking started again, this time at the side of the house, then the back. Slow. Patient. Like whoever it was didn't mind waiting. The dispatcher stayed on the line as I moved from room to room, checking locks, closing curtains. The candles flickered violently with every gust of wind, casting shadows that crawled along the walls. Then everything went quiet. No wind, no knocking. The silence was worse than the noise. I told the dispatcher it had stopped. She told me to stay alert and keep the line open. That's when I heard something inside the house. A soft, scraping sound. It came from the wall behind the couch. At first I thought it was the pipes. Old houses make strange noises in the cold. But this sound moved, slowly, deliberately, like fingernails dragging along wood. I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The scraping followed me. It stopped when I stopped. I whispered into the phone that something was wrong. The dispatcher asked if someone had broken in. I didn't know how to answer that. Because whatever was making that sound wasn't breaking in. It already felt like it was here. The scraping sound didn't stop. It moved along the inside of the wall, slow and careful, like whatever was making it didn't want to be heard too clearly. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, phone pressed to my ear, barely breathing. "Sir?" the dispatcher asked. "Are you still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "There's something inside the walls." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Do you hear footsteps? Voices?" "No," I said, "just scratching, like nails." Another pause. I could hear typing on her end, the faint clatter of keys. She told me again that help was on the way, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. Weather like this made promises fragile. The scraping reached the corner of the room and stopped. I waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. My arms ached from holding the phone too tightly. I told myself that if nothing else happened for 5 minutes, I'd calm down. Pipes expand. Animals get into crawl spaces. Fear exaggerates everything. Then the knocking came back. Not on a door this time. From the ceiling. 3 knocks, directly above me. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor hard enough that the call disconnected, but I didn't care. I stared up at the ceiling, at the faint cracks in the plaster, half expecting something to push through. The house was 1 story. There was nothing above me but insulation and roof. The knocks came again, louder now, dust drifting down with each impact. Whatever was up there wasn't trying to get in anymore. It was already testing where I was. I ran. I grabbed my coat, my keys, anything within reach, and bolted for the bedroom at the back of the house. The hallway felt longer than it ever had, shadows stretching and warping as the candles flickered behind me. As soon as I slammed the bedroom door shut, I heard movement. Fast this time, traveling through the walls toward me. I locked the door and backed into the corner, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. I tried calling 911 again, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the phone twice before managing to dial. No signal. The storm must have taken the tower. The scratching started again, right behind the headboard. Then a voice spoke. It was inside the room. Not loud, not threatening, just close. "You shouldn't hide," it said. I screamed. The voice sounded like mine, same tone, same cadence, same little hitch I get when I'm nervous. I covered my ears, squeezed my eyes shut, and begged myself to wake up. This had to be a dream. Some kind of stress-induced hallucination. The bed shifted. Something pressed down on the mattress beside me. I felt the weight of it, through the blankets. The voice sighed, almost disappointed. "I walked all this way." The pressure lifted. I opened my eyes. The room was empty. The door was still locked, the window still sealed. Snow hammered against the glass, the wind roaring back to life like nothing unnatural had just happened. I stayed there until morning. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just watched the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for the handle to turn. Nothing did. When daylight finally came, it felt unreal. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried under snow. My phone buzzed with missed calls and texts, all delayed notifications from the night before. Police arrived just after noon. They walked the perimeter of the house, checked the doors, the roof, the crawl space. One of them climbed up to inspect the attic access panel and came back down shaking his head. "No signs of entry," he said. "No animals either." I told them everything. The knocking, the voice, the thing on the bed. They exchanged looks that made me feel stupid for even talking. One officer asked if I'd been drinking. Another asked if I'd ever experienced sleep paralysis. I wanted to scream at them that I knew the difference between a nightmare and reality. Instead, I just nodded and let them leave. Before they did, one of them stopped at the front door. "Just so you know," he said, "there were no footprints." I asked him what he meant. "Anywhere," he said. "Not on your porch, not on your driveway, not even near the road." That night, I tried to stay awake again. I failed. I woke up just before dawn to the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks from inside the closet. I didn't check. I packed what I could carry, waited until the sun was fully up, and drove straight into town. I stayed in a motel for a week, telling myself I just needed time to calm down. When I finally went back, the house felt wrong. Colder. Heavier. I found something waiting for me on the kitchen table. My name, carved into the wood. Under it, 3 shallow grooves, like knock marks. I moved out 2 weeks later. The house sold quickly. The new owners never contacted me. But sometimes, during winter storms, I get phone calls from numbers I don't recognize. When I answer, all I hear is knocking. I thought leaving would end it. That was the lie I told myself while packing up my life into cardboard boxes, while signing papers with shaking hands, while pretending the house had simply been a bad chapter instead of something unfinished. I didn't tell anyone why I was selling. I said the winters were too harsh. That part was true. But winter wasn't the thing that scared me anymore. The thing that scared me followed me. The first night in my new apartment, I slept with every light on. It was a 3rd-floor unit in a busy city, surrounded by neighbors, traffic, noise, the kind of place where nothing like what I'd experienced should be able to exist. At 2:14 a.m., someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks. I sat up so fast my chest hurt. I didn't answer. The knocks came again. I forced myself to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no shadows. Just the hum of the building's fluorescent lights. I didn't sleep after that. Over the next few weeks, the knocking became selective. It didn't happen every night. Only when it snowed. Only when the wind was strong enough to drown out other sounds. Only when I was alone. I tried to ignore it. I told myself trauma had rewired my brain, that my mind was replaying patterns it had learned to fear. Therapists love explanations like that. But therapists don't get phone calls. The calls started a month after I moved. Unknown numbers. No caller ID, no voicemail. When I finally answered one, I didn't hear breathing. I heard my front door. Knocking. 3 slow knocks, perfectly timed. I hung up and smashed the phone against the wall hard enough to crack the screen. That didn't stop it. The calls kept coming. Different numbers. Same sound. I changed my number. The calls stopped. The knocking didn't. It started happening in public places. A bathroom stall, a train station locker. Once, at work, on the door of an empty conference room I had ducked into just to breathe. 3 knocks. Always 3. I started researching the area around my old house, desperate for context, for anything that could anchor what was happening to something rational. I spent hours scrolling through local forums, archived news articles, even old obituaries. That's when I found the first mention of it. Not a name, just a pattern. People going missing during winter storms. Not travelers, not hikers, homeowners. Always alone. Always during blizzards. Always with reports of knocking that led nowhere. One post stood out. It was years old, buried in a forum thread about rural folklore. Someone mentioned a phenomenon locals used to warn each other about. If you hear knocking during a storm, don't answer. If it knows your name, it's already too close. No explanation followed. No origin story. Just warnings. I contacted the poster. They never replied. A few nights later, the knocking came from inside my bedroom closet again. I didn't scream this time. I stood up, opened the closet door, and faced it. There was nothing there, but the air inside the closet was warm. Too warm. Like someone had been standing there for a long time. That's when I understood something I'd been avoiding since Montana. It wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to be let in. Every knock was an invitation. Every time I responded, asking who it was, shouting, even calling the police, I was acknowledging it, giving it shape, giving it permission to stay. The realization didn't make me feel safer. It made me feel hunted, because if it didn't need doors, and it didn't need walls, what exactly was stopping it? The answer came during the worst snowstorm the city had seen in a decade. Power outages rolled through neighborhoods. Wind howled through streets like a living thing. I sat in the dark, candles burning low, feeling a familiar dread settle into my bones. The knocking came from everywhere at once. Walls, ceiling, floor. 3 knocks, over and over. The lights flickered back on, and for the first time, I saw it. Not fully, not clearly. A shape, standing where my front door should have been reflected in the mirror. Tall, too tall. Its outline shifted like it couldn't decide what it was supposed to look like. Its voice filled the room. "I'm cold." I didn't answer. "I walked so far," it said. "You heard me?" I remembered the warnings, the posts, the silence of the people who had disappeared. I sat down on the floor, closed my eyes, and did the only thing I hadn't tried. I said nothing. The knocking grew frantic, angry. The sound splintered the wood, rattled the windows, shook the entire apartment. Then it stopped. The shape in the mirror dissolved like fog. The storm passed by morning. The knocking never came back. I moved again after that. Another city, another life. I don't live alone anymore. I avoid winter storms when I can. I keep noise on at all times. But sometimes, when snow falls especially hard, I hear something faint beneath the sound of the wind. 3 slow knocks. Not at my door, but in my head. And I know it's waiting for me to answer. I've lived alone most of my adult life, and if there's one thing you learn quickly when you do, it's how to trust your instincts. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet ones. The subtle sense that something is off, even when everything looks normal. The night this happened, my instincts were screaming. I live in a small rental house in northern Minnesota, the kind of place that looks harmless until winter arrives. Long driveway, trees packed tightly around the property. No close neighbors. During summer, it feels peaceful. During winter, it feels cut off from the rest of the world. The blizzard had been on the forecast for days. The news stations were doing what they always do, using words like historic and dangerous. But this time they weren't exaggerating. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a solid white, and the wind was strong enough to bend the trees around my house. I finished work around 6 and made dinner listening to the weather radio, repeat the same warning on a loop. Stay indoors. Emergency response may be delayed. By 9, the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see the end of my driveway. That was when the motion lights came on. At first, I assumed It was the wind blowing snow in just the right way to trigger the sensor. It happens. Still, I grabbed my phone and opened the security app. I like knowing what's happening outside, especially during storms. The camera feed took a second to load. When it did, I felt my stomach drop. Someone was standing at the edge of my driveway. The figure was barely visible through the snow, but it was definitely a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing the house, arms hanging at their sides. I checked the timestamp. The motion light had been on for almost 10 minutes. Okay, I muttered to myself. That's not normal. I watched the screen, waiting for them to move, to wave, to stumble, to do anything that suggested they were human and in trouble. They didn't. Eventually, the figure started walking toward the house, slowly, deliberately. I watched as they crossed the yard. That's when I noticed something strange. The snow on my lawn was smooth and untouched, a clean white sheet. As the person moved closer, that didn't change. No footprints appeared behind them. I leaned closer to the screen, convinced it had to be a camera glitch. The snowfall was heavy, sure, but not heavy enough to erase footprints instantly, especially not with how slowly they were moving. The figure reached my porch and stopped. The motion light flickered. I muted the TV and listened. A knock came at the front door. One knock, then another, then a third. I stayed on the couch. I didn't answer. A few seconds passed, and then a man's voice spoke through the door. Hello? My car's stuck. I need help. His voice sounded strained, like he was cold and tired. It was convincing enough that guilt crept in despite everything else setting off alarm bells. I stood up but didn't open the door. Instead, I spoke loudly enough for him to hear. I'll call for help. There was a pause. Then he knocked again, harder this time. Please, he said. I just need to warm up. I walked to the door and flipped the porch light on. Through the peephole, I saw him clearly for the first time. He was covered in snow from the shoulders up. His jacket, his hair, even his eyebrows were dusted white. But his boots were spotless, clean, dry, like he'd just stepped out of a warm car. I felt that quiet instinct kick in, cold and heavy in my gut. I'm calling the police, I said. Another pause. I don't think that's necessary, he replied, his voice firmer now, less tired, more annoyed. I backed away from the door. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping my eyes on the live camera feed. The man didn't move from the porch. He just stood there, staring straight ahead. The operator answered, and I explained what was happening. She told me to stay inside, keep all doors locked, and that officers were on the way, though response time could be slow due to the storm. While I was still on the line, the man turned his head. He looked directly into the camera and smiled. The motion lights shut off. The camera feed froze, and then my back door rattled violently. The back door shook again, harder this time. I could hear the frame creaking, wood straining against the force on the other side. Snow slammed against the house as the wind howled, but the sound at the door was deliberate, controlled. Someone was trying to get in. The 911 operator was still on the line, her voice calm but tense. She told me to move to a secure room, somewhere without windows if possible. I grabbed the largest kitchen knife from the counter and backed away from the door, my heart racing so hard I could feel it in my ears. I retreated down the hallway to my bedroom, locked the door, and pressed my back against it. The banging moved, not louder, not closer, smarter. It shifted from the back door to the side of the house, then stopped completely. The sudden silence made my skin crawl. "Are you hearing anything now?" the operator asked. "Yes," I whispered. "Nothing. And that's worse." A soft sound came from the other side of the bedroom wall. A scrape. like something brushing against the siding. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps crunching against the snow outside my bedroom window. I moved toward the window just enough to peek through the curtain. He was standing there, close enough that I could see his face clearly now. He looked normal, mid-30s maybe, pale skin, short dark hair, no visible injuries. His eyes were open wide, unblinking, fixed on the window. I froze. The operator told me not to approach any windows, but it was too late. He knew I was there. He raised his hand and knocked, 3 times, on the glass. I backed away, shaking, and nearly dropped the knife. The man leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass for the first time since I'd seen him. That's when I noticed something else. The fog didn't fade. It stayed there, thick and unmoving, like the cold outside wasn't touching him at all. "I can see you," he said, his voice muffled through the glass. "You look warm." The operator asked me if he was still there. I told her yes. She told me to stay where I was and keep the door locked. Officers were en route, but stuck behind road closures. The man stepped away from the window. For a moment I thought he was leaving. Then I heard the sound of my garage door opening. My stomach dropped. I told the operator what was happening, my words tumbling over each other. She told me to stay in the bedroom no matter what. The garage connected directly to the house. I heard footsteps inside now, slow and unhurried, like he wasn't worried about being caught. The hallway floor creaked. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. Silence. Then his voice came through the door, calm and conversational. "You should have let me in," he said. "It would have been easier." I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the knife so hard my hand cramped. The doorknob turned. It didn't budge. He tried again. Still locked. He laughed softly like he was amused by my attempt at resistance. "That won't hold," he said. The door shook as he slammed his shoulder into it. Once, twice. On the third hit, the doorframe cracked. I screamed into the phone, begging the operator to hurry. Then everything stopped. The footsteps retreated down the hallway. I listened, barely breathing, as I heard the garage door close again. A moment later, the car horn sounded. One long, continuous honk. It echoed through the storm, cutting through the wind like a warning. Minutes passed. Then red and blue lights flashed through my bedroom window. Police. I ran out of the room, knife still in hand, and nearly collapsed when I saw them inside the house. They swept through every room, weapons drawn, but found nothing. No man. No damage to the doors. No sign anyone had been inside. One officer asked if I was sure the garage door had opened. I showed them the camera footage. The clip cut out right when the man smiled into the camera. The officer frowned. "That file's corrupted," he said. They walked the property with flashlights, even though the snow was still falling hard. That's when they found the car, partially buried in a snowbank down the road. The engine was cold. It hadn't been driven recently, and there were no footprints leading away from it. The officer told me something I haven't been able to forget since. "There are footprints around your house," he said, "but they don't lead to the car." They stopped at the edge of my driveway, like he'd arrived another way. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, when the storm finally passed, I went outside with one of the officers to check the house. That's when I saw the handprints, muddy, human, pressed against the outside of my bedroom window. They were on the glass, from the inside. I stood there staring at the handprints, my breath coming out in short, shaky bursts. The glass was cold under my fingers, but the marks themselves were dry. No melting snow, no condensation, just the clear outline of 2 human hands, pressed hard enough to leave faint streaks from the inside. The officer beside me noticed my expression change and asked what was wrong. I pointed at the window, expecting him to react the same way I had. He frowned. "There's nothing there," he said. I leaned closer. The handprints were still visible to me, clear as day. Fingers, palms, even smudges where someone had shifted their weight. "You don't see that?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No." The officers exchanged looks I recognized immediately, the kind reserved for people they quietly decide not to argue with. One of them suggested I stay with a friend or family member for a few days. Another mentioned stress, isolation, shock from the storm. I didn't bother correcting them. They left shortly after, taking the abandoned car with them. Before driving away, one officer stopped and turned back to me. "For what it's worth," he said, lowering his voice, "we get strange calls during storms. More than you'd think." I asked him what he meant. He hesitated. "People reporting someone outside their house, knocking, watching. But when we arrive, there's never anyone there." That night, I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe the hope that if I faced it one more time, it would stop. I was wrong. Around midnight, the temperature dropped sharply. The house creaked as it settled, every sound amplified by the silence left behind by the storm. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, every camera feed pulled up on my phone. At 12:37 a.m., the motion light turned on again. My chest tightened. The camera feed loaded slowly, buffering just long enough to make my pulse spike. When the image sharpened, I saw him. He was standing closer this time, at the base of the porch steps, his face tilted upward, staring directly at the camera, still no footprints. I watched in horror as he lifted his hand and waved. Then he spoke. Not through the door. Through the speakers of my security system. "You can see me now," he said. "That means you're ready." I unplugged the system. The house went quiet. Too quiet. I felt it before I heard it. That sense of being watched, not from outside, but from somewhere inside the walls, inside the spaces between rooms. The hallway light flickered. Footsteps echoed softly on the floorboards. I stood up slowly, every nerve screaming at me to run, but I had nowhere to go. The front door was on the other side of the house. So was the back. The footsteps stopped behind me. His reflection appeared in the dark TV screen. He was standing just a few feet away. I spun around. There was nothing there. A hand landed on my shoulder. It was ice cold. I screamed and stumbled forward, nearly falling as his grip tightened. His voice was right next to my ear now. "You should have opened the door," he whispered. "You made me come. In the hard way." I don't remember deciding to fight back. I just did. I swung blindly, feeling my elbow connect with something solid. The grip loosened, and I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, barefoot in the snow, sprinting down the driveway without caring about the cold or the dark. I banged on my neighbor's door until my fists hurt. They let me in immediately. I didn't go back inside my house that night. Or ever. I moved out within a week. I didn't tell the landlord the real reason. I just said I couldn't stay there anymore. Months passed. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. I moved into an apartment building. Neighbors on every side, security at the entrance, cameras everywhere. I told myself that whatever it was couldn't follow me there. I almost believed it. Until the first snowstorm of the season. I was standing by my window, watching the snow fall between the streetlights, when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the courtyard below, someone was standing perfectly still, looking up. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I didn't need to. The motion lights flickered on. The snow around him remained untouched. My phone buzzed in my hand. a notification from my security app, motion detected, front door camera. Then came the knock. 3 slow, familiar knocks, and a voice I will never forget. "I found you." People assume the mountains are dangerous because they're unpredictable. That isn't true. The mountains are dangerous because they don't care. I learned that long before this happened. I spent most of my 20s racing downhill at speeds that left no room for hesitation. Alpine skiing wasn't just something I did, it was how I understood the world. Balance, pressure, instinct. You trusted your training, respected the terrain, and accepted that mistakes were punished immediately. When I retired from competition at 26, it wasn't dramatic. No blown-out knee, no helicopter rides, just years of accumulated damage and the quiet realization that my body couldn't keep doing this forever. But walking away from racing didn't mean walking away from the mountains. If anything, it pushed me deeper into them. Backcountry skiing became my escape. No crowds, no lift lines, just snow, silence, and the kind of isolation that clears your head. I trained properly, stayed certified, checked avalanche reports obsessively. I never went out unprepared. That's why what happened still doesn't make sense. I was 34 and living in British Columbia when it happened. Late winter, the kind of cold that feels clean and sharp, like it scrapes your lungs when you breathe. The forecast called for light snowfall. Nothing dramatic. A simple day trip to a familiar range a few hours north of where I lived. I'd skied that terrain dozens of times. That was my first mistake. Familiarity makes you careless in ways you don't notice until it's too late. I left before sunrise, drove through winding roads still half buried from the last storm, and parked at the trailhead just as the sky started to lighten. The air was still, quiet, the kind of calm that feels earned. I checked my gear twice. Beacon, probe, shovel, first aid kit. Everything where it should be. The climb up was slow, but steady. Snow started falling lightly as I skinned uphill, the flakes small and dry, barely noticeable. I told myself I'd reassess at the ridge and turn back if anything felt off. By the time I reached the top, the wind had changed. It wasn't violent, but it was wrong. Coming from a direction the forecast hadn't mentioned. Visibility was already dropping faster than I liked, the sky flattening into a dull gray that erased depth and distance. The smart move would have been to turn around right then. I didn't. There was a line I'd been thinking about all week, nothing extreme, just technical enough to be interesting. I told myself one run, quick and careful. That was my second mistake. The descent started clean. Snow felt stable under my skis, the pitch manageable. I stayed conservative, controlling speed, reading the terrain like I always did. 2/3 of the way down, the mountain decided I was done. There was no warning sound, no dramatic crack. The snow simply moved. The ground vanished beneath me as the slab broke loose. I remember the sensation more than the visuals, that sudden loss of control, the way your body goes weightless for a split second before gravity takes over. I was lucky. The avalanche was small, maybe class 2, enough to knock me off my skis, not enough to bury me completely. I tumbled hard, rolling over and over until everything stopped all at once. I slammed into something solid. Pain exploded through my left leg. For a moment, I just lay there, gasping, waiting for the panic to pass. I wiggled my fingers, my toes. Everything responded except my leg. My skis had released, which probably saved my life. One was nearby. The other was gone, swallowed somewhere downhill. I tried to stand. The pain was immediate and blinding. I collapsed back into the snow. Teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. I knew that kind of pain. I'd felt it before, severe sprain at best. Something worse at worst. Either way, skiing out wasn't happening. The snow kept falling. Heavier now. I sat there and forced myself to think. Shock kills people faster than injuries do. I had to stay calm. My options were bad, worse, and suicidal. I could stay where I was and hope someone came looking. Only one person knew my route that day, and they wouldn't expect me back until evening. I could try to dig in and wait out the storm, risking hypothermia with an injured leg. Or I could move, slowly, painfully. But at least moving gave me a chance. I chose to move. I secured what gear I could and started limping downhill, using one ski pole as a crutch. Every step sent white-hot pain through my leg, but adrenaline dulled it just enough to keep me going. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The world shrank to a few feet in front of me, everything else swallowed by snow and wind. I focused on one thing: keep moving. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me. At first, I thought it was my own movement echoing strangely through the storm. Snow does that sometimes, plays tricks on your ears. But the sound didn't match my rhythm. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. My heart started racing again. I turned slowly, half expecting to see nothing, to confirm that stress and cold were finally getting to me. Instead, I saw a figure emerging from the snowfall. Another skier. He moved easily, confidently, like the storm didn't bother him at all. He wore backcountry gear similar to mine, but something about him felt off. His movements were too smooth, too effortless. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave out. "Hey!" I shouted. "I'm injured." He reached me within moments, close enough that I could see his face, calm, almost serene. "Looks like you need help," he said. His voice carried clearly through the wind. I nodded, unable to hide how shaken I was. I told him about the avalanche, about my leg. Without hesitation, he stepped closer and let me put my arm over his shoulder. When I did, a strange feeling settled over me. Not relief, not fear. Something colder. As we started moving together, he spoke again. "I haven't walked like this in a long time," he said quietly. "I missed the feeling." I laughed weakly, assuming it was some kind of joke. I didn't realize yet that he wasn't joking at all. We moved slowly through the storm, my weight pressed against his shoulder. He didn't struggle under it. If anything, he seemed steadier with me there, his pace unchanging despite the deep snow and poor visibility. That should have reassured me. It didn't. Backcountry skiers learn to read each other the same way they read terrain. Small things give people away. Breathing patterns, balance shifts, micro adjustments in the snow. He made none. His steps didn't crunch. They didn't slide or sink the way mine did. Each footfall landed perfectly, like the snow was solid beneath him. "You're handling this well," he said after a while. "Not really," I replied through clenched teeth. "Just trying not to pass out." He nodded, as if that confirmed something. "Most people stop," he said. "They sit down and decide they're done." I asked him how far he thought it was to the trailhead. "A while," he said. "But we'll get there." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. Not confident. Certain. The storm thickened around us, snow blowing sideways now, erasing any sense of direction. I tried to keep track of our descent mentally, but the pain and exhaustion were blurring everything together. At some point, I realized something else. I couldn't hear his breathing. Not once did I feel his chest rise or fall beneath my arm. No strain, no hitch when we climbed a small rise or crossed uneven ground. "Do you want to take a break?" he asked. I did. God, I did. My leg was screaming and my vision was starting to tunnel, but every instinct I had told me not to stop. "I'm okay," I said. "Let's keep moving." He smiled slightly at that. "Good," he said. "You learn fast." We passed a cluster of trees, their branches heavy with snow. As we moved through them, the wind died down for a moment, replaced by an eerie, muffled quiet. That's when I noticed the tracks. My tracks were there, deep, uneven, dragging where I favored my injured leg. Next to them, nothing. No second set of footprints. I slowed, my heart pounding. "You're not leaving tracks," I said. He looked down at the snow, then back at me. "Of course I am," he said calmly. But the ground behind us was smooth and untouched, aside from my own messy trail. Cold dread spread through my chest. I told myself it was the wind filling them in quickly. That had to be it. Storm conditions could erase tracks in minutes, except I could still see mine perfectly. He noticed my staring. "You're not supposed to look for that," he said. My grip tightened on his shoulder. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. We kept moving. Minutes passed, or hours. Time lost meaning. The landscape felt wrong, repeating itself in subtle ways. The same rock outcrop, the same bent tree. Like we were walking in a slow, looping circle. "Have we been here before?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "You just didn't notice." My fear turned sharp then, cutting through the pain and fatigue. I tried to pull away from him. He didn't stop me. The moment my weight left his shoulder, my leg buckled and I collapsed into the snow. I cried out, the pain finally overwhelming the adrenaline. He stood over me, looking down without concern. "You can't go alone," he said. "Not anymore." I scrambled backward, dragging myself through the snow. My hands burned from the cold. "Who are you?" I demanded. He crouched down, bringing his face level with mine. "Someone who didn't get help," he said. "Someone who sat down." A gust of wind tore through the trees, rattling branches violently. Snow whipped around us, and for a second, the world vanished into white. When it cleared, he was standing again, a few steps farther away. "You don't want to stop," he said. "Stopping is how you stay." "What happens if I stay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. His smile returned, thin and distant. "You walk forever," he said. I looked past him, panic spiking. The trees were thinning. Ahead, through the snowfall, I saw something dark cutting across the white. A road. Hope flared painfully in my chest. I forced myself up, screaming as my leg protested. I didn't wait for his help this time. I limped forward, every step fueled by desperation. He followed, unhurried. "You're almost done," he said. "Most don't get this far." The road came into focus as we approached. Snow-covered asphalt, guardrails, tire tracks. Real. Solid. Salvation. I stumbled onto it and collapsed, sobbing with relief. I turned back toward the trees. He stopped at the edge of the forest. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "You can still come back," he said. I shook my head violently. "No." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Next time," he said softly. Then he stepped backward, into the trees, and vanished. A few minutes later, a truck skidded to a stop on the road. A man jumped out, shouting, calling for help. He wrapped me in blankets and radioed for rescue. As they loaded me into the vehicle, I looked back toward the forest one last time. The snow was falling hard. There were footprints leading out of the trees. Only one set. The ambulance lights cut through the storm like beacons of salvation. I leaned back, shivering, wrapped in the thin blankets the paramedics threw over me. Pain throbbed in my leg, but the terror in my mind refused to ease. I had escaped the mountain, the storm, and whatever that figure was, or so I thought. At the hospital, everything blurred into routine chaos. A sprained leg, ice packs, x-rays, adrenaline slowly replaced by exhaustion. I told the staff a condensed version, leaving out most details. They chalked it up to a backcountry skiing accident. I couldn't tell them the truth. No one would believe me. That night, in the sterile, white hospital room, I kept replaying it in my mind. His words, the absence of tracks, the way he moved, the way he had disappeared into the forest, leaving no trail. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. I wondered if I had imagined it all. The next morning, the doctor delivered the expected news. Severe sprain, no fracture, good prognosis. Discharge in a day or two. Relief washed over me, but the unease stayed. Once home, I tried to resume normal life, work emails, grocery shopping, friends. Yet every time I saw a snow-covered hill or even a forecast for flurries, my heart rate jumped. My dreams were filled with the forest, the snow, and him. Weeks passed. I told myself I was overreacting. A hallucination, sleep deprivation, fear of isolation, logical explanations. Yet something gnawed at the edge of my mind. Then, I found the news article. A man missing in the same backcountry area just weeks before my accident. Reports assumed fatal. No body recovered. Authorities closed the case after months of searching. I stared at the photo. Similar height, similar gear, face obscured by a balaclava. I shivered. I hadn't imagined him. He had been real, or at least something real had followed me. From that point on, I refused to ski alone. Months later, a friend invited me to a group trip. I agreed reluctantly. I stayed close to the others, checking every movement in the snow. The mountains no longer felt like allies. They felt sentient, cold, indifferent, hiding secrets beneath layers of ice. Then, last winter, nearly a year later, I returned to that same range. Daylight, safe weather, experienced guides, everything within reason. I reached a familiar spot, the slope where I'd first felt the snow vanish beneath me. I paused, leaning on my ski poles. The mountain was silent, perfect, still. And then I saw him, standing at the tree line, watching. I froze, my breath caught, heart thudding in my chest, not moving, not blinking, just standing. I wanted to scream, run, hide. But the mountain had changed me. I didn't move. I could only watch. Then he lifted a hand, a slow, deliberate wave. I didn't recognize any face beneath the balaclava this time, just black, empty eyes. He didn't move toward me, didn't retreat, simply stood, a sentinel among the white expanse. I blinked. When I looked again, he was gone. No footprints, no disturbed snow, nothing. I've never skied alone since. I keep thinking about him, about the way he said, "You can't go alone, not anymore," about the feeling of his shoulder under mine, supporting my weight, about the absence of tracks, the perfect movement, the strange sense of certainty in his presence. Some nights I wake in the middle of winter storms, the wind howling outside, and I swear I hear footsteps in the snow just beyond my window. Slow, certain, approaching. I don't look outside anymore. And sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I see movement. A shadow crossing the snow. A figure standing, watching, waiting.